And we are live on Being Human, live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube with my now regular guest, Tom van der Lubbe from Visie in Holland. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Richard.
It's a delight to have you in the midst of what is a sobering time for many. You reached out to me, and I thought we'd talk. We could talk a little bit about the practicalities of how Visie is responding to you, and then perhaps the broader implications of what this situation that we now find ourselves in might mean for the world of business and perhaps society at large. So, yeah, let's start with how are you responding? How Visie is responding right now?
Very good question. Since quite a long time ago, we thought that we should have a recession scenario, but we didn't think about the coronavirus. So there's a recession playbook, so to say, already around. And then if you already have thought about what you have to do in a certain situation, it's much easier to react when the situation is there. And I was interviewed quite a lot the last couple of days or last week, because we immediately also started to share our experiences on social media about this. And you just see that a lot of people are just totally paralyzed and don't know how to get their company running, so to say. And we are just 24 hours, everything was working just normally, remote, everything at home. So
wow, 24. Well, let's start with that. How are you able to respond so quickly?
So we started. Let's say, this is the first day of the second week in the Netherlands. And let's say last week on Monday, the weekend before, we already had a crisis team in place, which we set up the week before. So that's a little bit more than a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, so to say. And there we just had a kind of hierarchy of steps. So first we said there should be a crisis team, but what should be the focus of the crisis team? And then you end up with the stakeholder discussion, and we said, okay, it should be people first crisis team. So we took the people first team, because the focus always should be on the humanity of the whole crisis. That's first. And then we have the second part is, how do you organize this? It's about liquidity, about your processes, rhythm, meetings, online stuff, etc. And the third part was, because we already thought about this, could a crisis be also a reach chance for us? It's very difficult to use the phrase "never waste a good crisis," because this is a horrible crisis and it will harm a lot of people, and especially weaker people in society. So, but a crisis always means that there is a chance of doing things better, to fasten innovation. And the question is, who really has the stuff in place and organized to win relatively to competitors.
Right. So this is people first. So talk to me a little bit then about how that imperative to make people first has driven your decision making over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, what you already see and what you will see in the next coming weeks is that if you talk about stakeholders, the question is, who is really first? So just take the opposite. Companies who are shareholder driven, they will lay off people immediately, because they want
to show that already, right?
Yeah. They want to show their shareholders that they are reacting in a really strong way. From our point of view, it's exactly the wrong method. But if you have thought about this before, you can analyze this and you can say, okay, if you take crises from the past, who were the winners of those crises? And the interesting thing is, and also a very positive thing, is that companies who reacted in a human way and put their people first, they always were in the long term the winners. Never the shareholder value driven companies. And that's very good news, probably for everybody who is listening to your podcast. So being human in a crisis really pays out in the long term. That it shouldn't be the reason to act like that, but at least it's very good. It's very good news, because if you would say, I want to be a human-focused employer, but I think that from an economic point of view it doesn't make sense, then you would have a conflict of interest. But you don't have a conflict of interest. So if you are human-centered, if you put your people first in your company, you can even argue from an economic point of view that it's the better strategy. And
Yeah.
in normal times, this is also the case, but in crisis, it becomes much more. You see it immediately, because what people dislike a lot, if you have a crisis situation, people want to have solidarity, much more than in normal times. In normal times, it's very difficult to argue that you should take care of the weaker, let's say, people are in a weaker position, etc. In a crisis, and you see this on social media already, if people lay off, if companies lay off people, you get a kind of shitstorm.
Yeah.
People don't like that. People want, because people are humans. People want to have solidarity, and people expect that those companies who are in strong positions. So the more, let's say, possibilities people or companies have to take care of their people, the more society will expect this to happen.
Yeah, and I think that, yes, and you say that, and for those companies that this is already part of their culture, they're going to find it much easier to respond in a tone which is, or in a way that is accepted by the populace right now, because it will be their natural inclination.
Yeah, and the first thing, if you have thought about this before, it's not the shareholder who is dominating the crisis team. So if you have thought this before and already have analyzed what also would make sense for a strategy, you can just write down the steps you have to take. So the first step is, then, if you just do it very practically. So we did a big town hall last Thursday for the company, and we just explained how our strategy was done. So first we did just the structure and the rhythm and offline, remote working, and so everything was in place. And then with Thursday we did a big town hall. Everything was online. It was also filmed, for instance, so that people who couldn't make it were still able to listen to this afterwards. So, and it's something you really have to think about this before. And then we said, okay, we explained the strategy and said, okay, we are in this together, and the only really priority we have is to see each other, let's say, in 3 months' time, everybody still in good health, hopefully nobody really harmed in our, let's say, families, etc. That's the main goal, full stop. So we're not going to lay off anybody. And then we explained how we're going to do this. And then we said, okay, everybody has the question, how much money do we have in the company? Is this enough? And then we took the worst case scenario. So we didn't say, let's just start, and then that's because it's in crisis management what happens on the level of society at the moment. That every day there is a message which is worse than the message yesterday. And that doesn't work. So you take the worst case scenario, and we said, okay, let's just assume the crisis takes 3 months, for instance, and we wouldn't have any revenue at all. And then we said, okay, how much money do we have? How much money do we need? We're going to solve this as shareholders, for instance. So we're discussing as shareholders how much money. I mean, we have enough liquidity, but just to show that we are totally secure that it won't be any problem at all. So everybody can just work on all the topics they normally don't have time for if we wouldn't have any clients. If we wouldn't. The funny thing is that we just had normal revenues last week. We just have the normal amount of appointments this week. It's incredible. Why? Because people felt totally trusted. They feel secure. So they act like that. So we have the second point is then this liquidity. And then we said, okay, there's enough money that if we don't have any revenues the next 3 months, there's no problem at all. And then we even could raise more money. let's say from our people, etc. Or we could ask who is able to just to say, okay, I don't need my salary for 1 month or something. So it's about solidarity. It's not about take an Excel sheet and 10% has to leave the company, hire and fire. And this discussion normally you also have, but now solidarity is much more important.
Yeah. And that's interesting you said that, right? By eliminating the fear, people are not, they're not scrabbling around wondering if they're going to have a job. They're not distracted by fear, and they're able to get on their jobs, and you're seeing normal business. I mean, that's extraordinary.
And it's interesting. Last week, we already had immediately in the beginning of the week or immediately this turnaround, because our most negative, our worst case scenario was that we had to pay normal taxes, normal social security, and we didn't count in this our scenario any help of the government. And then every measure of the government which is exactly the opposite strategy. Oh, we are going to reserve so much money, and then 2 days later, it's not enough. It's already, all the companies already have applied for this. So every next measure from the government, which is for their strategy, I would say, it's not their worst case scenario, is a positive message for us. Because people said, for instance, last week already, our scenario is much better because we get support from the government, or we don't have to pay taxes, or we don't have to pay social security, which is a very strange thing. So in the outside world, the message is negative. For us, it's positive. Then people said, oh, I still have clients who want to an appointment. So because we said we will have in our worst case scenario, no clients at all. So it's very interesting. So that even if you have no clients, and then somebody says, okay, oh, my clients still want to talk to me. And then at the end of the week, I got the numbers on Saturday. We had the same amount of appointments we have normally, which doesn't mean that we will say, or also said, this will slow down in the next weeks. But now people said, for instance, okay, let's just contact our clients from the past, because there's a fear of that interest rates go up, and the clients already approached us and say, okay, perhaps I should have a talk to you and see if I have to change the loan and go to another bank. And the first advisors already said, my clients are approaching me, so recurring clients. And then we said, okay, let's just analyze our 7,000 clients from the past. Can we do this in an automatic way? So we are installing software, and then we can say, okay, everybody will call his own clients. Can we help you? So we already are in a positive, let's say, dynamic, which is very strange, because if you close down your notebook at the end of the day, you turn out the television, it's horror.
Yeah,
it's a horrible situation, because you all have this negative news.
Yeah, and that really reinforces the point here that by focusing on the people, by putting people's minds at rest, by getting people into a trusting state of mind, you're ultimately taking care of your financial performance. But it's only by putting your people first.
And the people are much better. So performance goes up. Why? Because people are so motivated to contribute to the whole team. So a colleague of us who makes videos, he made a video just to help his colleagues. How do they have to install themselves when they do calls with video with their clients? Nobody asked him to do this, and then he sent it internally. He said, okay, I just took some time, and everybody said, it's a brilliant video. Just put it online. So this empowerment, and it's also a very good sign also for self-organization. So in big companies, people were discussing if they could take a screen from their office at home, because they don't trust their people, or they get a whole manual how to behave and what they have to do with their calendars. And we said we have 3 categories of colleagues. One category is the category of people who have partners who work in hospital or for the police or the army, and we took the decision, which is very normal because it's in our DNA. We said we don't expect anything from you. Take care of your children. Your wife is in hospital, so you don't have to do anything. If you would like to, you can do so, but just solve it in the team. So I really don't know what the research people have. I only know which people have, let's say, partners who work in the hospital, because we have two or three who are working in the hospital, and we have one colleague who is working for the police, and one colleague, or let's say partner of our colleagues, and one is in the army. And we just said, okay, we just expect that those people will have to help and be on the street and or be in the hospitals. So those 5 colleagues would just say, okay, they don't have to do anything. Then we have the second category of those people like me who have children and a partner who also has to work. And we just said, okay, from a private point of view, people will only be able to work 50% because you are able to work 50%, and then the other day of the other part of the day you have to take care of the children, and which is, I find, sometimes even more difficult than working for the company. So let's say having this call with you and just hoping that my 2 little boys won't come in or make a huge noise, that's really difficult. And that happens. And then the third category are those people who are, let's say, single or don't have children and just can work normally, 100%. And this is solved in those teams. I really don't know how they are operating, but just telling somebody who has a partner who is working in hospital, you don't have to work at all. We don't expect anything from you. That creates an enormous rest. And what do people? They say, okay, I will just sit when the children are at bed and let me just do stuff to support my colleagues. So it's also for the morale of the whole team. It's a huge booster. I mean, the circumstances are terrible, but what happens in a kind of let's say team environment for the culture, it's and especially all those people around talk to their friends, where in a lot of companies people are really treated, yeah, how shall I put this in a very diplomatic way, not that well. So people also have a very good possibility of seeing the differences, how people are treated in companies.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that's one of the things that this will reveal. It's the strength of the human capital that the companies like yours have, where there's very high trust cultures, self-organized cultures. We're going to see them able to respond in a more humane way, in a way that's more economically advantageous, in a way that's more flexible to the circumstances. I had one example of Walgreens in the US. They've outsourced a lot of their work to India, and a lot of those Indian colleagues have been sent home, but they're unable to work from home. They don't have laptops. They don't have anything. But you can imagine in a self-organized environment where such a thing happens, people will be trusted, right, to solve their own solutions, right? So this ability to be resilient is highly impaired in low trust cultures.
I just give you one practical example, which is an actual example in a lot of countries. We said to our people when people took their computers home, we said, if your partner needs an extra screen or computer, just take another one home. In other companies, people were discussing which paper they had to fill out, and then it took too long, and then afterwards the whole companies were closed down for compliance reasons, and people just are sitting at home now with their private laptops, which are not secured from a data point of view. So it's because and I just said we don't care at all. I mean, take as much as stuff. I mean, you have to check and you have to discuss this, but we just announced if your partner needs an extra screen, etc. Just tell us, because we will organize it. You can just take one from us.
Yeah. Before we came on air, you were talking about the responses from some other examples of, let's say, progressive companies or high trust cultures, self-organizing cultures. What else are you seeing out there in terms of responses from other like-minded companies?
Yeah, I saw. I think it's Saturday a week ago. I already expected this to happen. It was Patagonia, and they announced that they would close down all their. I think their shops, but also their factory. I'm not quite sure. And they said we'll just continue to pay everybody, but we'll close down. And they put it on their website, etc. And it was immediately picked up by social media. So you have this kind of litmus test or acid test. It's a huge possibility for everybody to see which companies treat their people in what way, and then people can decide. And I already do this, for instance. There was also a negative message of Amazon in Spain, where the warehouse where people were sick, and they didn't close the warehouse. I mean, you can argue that it's very important, etc. But we just know also from the past how they treat their people. So, and in a normal situation where you don't have a crisis, I also have a list of companies I just don't buy anything. So the positive example is Patagonia, but there is just a list, and everybody should make this list for her or himself. I try at the moment to shop around at the small shops in the neighbor, let's say in where I live, and I try to avoid to buy online at the big companies. I mean, Amazon just announced that they hire 100,000 people, and it was seen as a kind of, I don't know if it's seen as a positive message, but that means that 100,000 people at very small shops around the corner, they are losing their jobs. And that's where people should act on. And if you just see also, let's say, the reactions of people just don't like this. So people like strong companies to behave in a social way when there is a crisis. That's what people expect.
Yeah. Well, that's not necessarily true, is it? That just because Amazon increased their workforce, it doesn't necessarily mean, right, that small shops are going out of business.
Yeah, in the end, it is. I mean, it's not very difficult to combine those two. So because, for instance, also a lot of small shops, they don't have the possibility of switching to the online business. But it's very, let's say, people are selling flowers around the corner, then you just see they have to close down, or people who grow those flowers, and now they try to install online models as fast as possible, just to be able to have an alternative way of selling their flowers which they grow. And you see those examples around everywhere. But I mean, when I buy a book, and I'm not talking about ebooks, so perhaps it's not a good example, but I just see, as long as I'm allowed to go outside, I see that just people from a bookstore just have a sign and say, okay, if you want to have a book, you can still order by email, and we send it through mail. I mean, that's more complicated for me than if I would, let's say, go on a huge platform and order it there. But let's say, I mean, I also can understand for convenience reasons, etc., that you don't have time, and then you want to just order, let's say, at a certain company all your stuff. But you can just see how do people really behave. Is the starting point? I feel responsible for the people in our company, or are they just resources? And these are topics we also talked about in the past. And in a kind of shareholder value driven way of thinking, people are resources, and you can need them or you don't need them. There's no commitment to human beings.
Yeah, and I think that's the underlying principle here. So I think this is, for me, it's less about big company, small company. Because, for example, here in the UK, we have examples of small corner shops where they're selling hand sanitizer for £10, right? For whatever that is, like 15 euro. right? So these are small companies, and in this case, it's their customers, and that there's no spirit of solidarity with their customers.
That's
they're
right,
seeing their customers as a resource, and they're seeing them as a way to, right. But equally, we've got large companies like Patagonia, right? I think didn't it recently hit $1 billion in revenue, right? Who are being extremely humane in their response. So
also you can even take Apple. Apple also did the same like Patagonia did. I mean, they have so much money, so you can say it's easy for them to do so, but still, others wouldn't. So there's something about positive also about Apple. They did exactly the same like Patagonia. So it's not about, let's say, small and big. It's a little bit more, let's say, diverse. But let's say everybody has common sense to value what is happening around, and that's the only point I want to make. That let's say if you have also this discussion about no assholes. If you don't have a crisis, if you talk about no assholes, everybody says, what do you really mean? In a crisis, everybody knows immediately what assholes are. So
yeah, we know who the assholes are.
If you go to a grocery, I didn't buy a lot of toilet paper, for instance, because I said no, I'm not going to do this, and then there was no toilet paper anymore. And then a couple of days later, there was toilet paper again. But people are fighting in shops about toilet paper. It's not about let's share. No, who's first? I'm first. This is also this American first approach. I mean, Trump tried to get this vaccine, which in Germany, and said, "Can I have it exclusively for my own people?" I mean, so you have it on all levels. You have on all levels. You have the assholes, and you have the people who know what solidarity means. So a crisis is a good example to get. I wouldn't say to get rid of the assholes, but at least to know who are the assholes are. So the crisis, as this one, is a litmus test or an acid test. So everybody can immediately see what color, or am I an asshole or am I not an asshole? Let's say, do you get the label solidarity, or do I get the label I don't care about the others, it's me first and I don't care about the rest? And you have it on all levels. And because there's a lot of pressure in a crisis, people don't have the time to really think about diplomatic moves. So if you just take the example of the vaccination, of the medicine in Germany of Trump, I mean, this is probably the most extreme example we have seen until now about his presidency. You ask a company in Germany to get it exclusively for your own people. I mean, that's America first to the max.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And I think that one of the reasons, because I suspect that there's this tendency to behave in selfish ways when we're feeling fearful is in all of us. And so what is it special about the type of culture that Visi is creating, or these other, there's something about these trusted links, these relationships, the nature of the conversations that's become so embedded in the way that people operate that I imagine that tendency to act selfishly gets checked quite quickly. Am I right there? Like people sort of feel that their social ties in such a way that they would feel inhibited to act in that way.
Yeah, it becomes DNA. I mean, people who know about habit, and if you research on habit, you have to do it again and again. So if you say people first, I mean, there are so many articles around, and it's always people first, and people always said, yeah, but why are clients second? I mean, I think at the moment I don't have to explain. So also, I even don't have to explain to people who used to be shareholder value oriented. I also said in the past, it's the end of shareholder value capitalism. It's just over. Now, and everybody says, oh, that's a really bold statement. And then the 200 CEOs of the US had this declaration. I think if you just say shareholder capitalism, the way we did it, or we're laying off people and not caring for each other, this way of capitalism has really stopped. Probably you can read in every newspaper every day at the moment, because really people are fed up with this lacking of solidarity. How many articles are written about people who work in hospitals, about teachers, about really people are solving the shit and normally treated in a very undecent way. And now people said, and now people applaud in all those countries for people working in hospitals and etc. And normally they have to fight for pay rises or for equipment or other stuff, etc. And now everybody says, "Oh, we're so thankful, we're so thankful." It's a hypocrisy which is unbearable. But now, so the question always is, what do we learn from that? Are we really changing our society? Are we really make a list and say, okay, we really made a really bad mistake. We really treated people working in hospitals in treating elderly people, teachers, etc. I mean, there are videos around of let's say, good luck parents. We only know you from this, let's say, 2 times a year. You explain me as a teacher how I should do it. Please tell me after 1 week how well you are teaching your children. I mean, all those videos are around now. But are we really able to be honest and say, okay, we really have to discuss the way we act together as a society, and people are really important in a society, are not those people behind the screens. These are the teachers, the people who work in hospitals, policemen, the firemen, and those people, they have probably 3 times higher risk of getting the virus at the moment. Those people are working 24 hours in hospitals. And really, let's try to put this on the agenda. I mean, and they are so humble that they don't say, which they say from the financial industry normally would be, they would say, shall we just solve our salary issue in all those countries before we go to the intensive care? I mean, they're just too decent to do this. Just take other industries. They just say, they go on strike and say, no, we are so important. Let's first try to solve our salary issue and then I will come back, etc. They're just too decent.
But I think they're too decent, but I also think, coming back to the culture in which they're in, right? These are people who are working in highly purpose-driven organizations. They're often working in very high trust teams. They're relying on each other in a way that we don't perhaps in other sectors. So they've created these organizations that bring out the best in our human spirit. It's not like, if I'm a doctor, I'm some kind of inherently a better person somehow. I think a lot of this has to do, I mean, maybe you are, because that's the question, right? You're drawn to that profession in the first place. But there's certainly something about the culture that these people exist in.
But the funny thing is, you ask, is this part of our DNA? Yes, it is. So our people always got a small book, and I think it's not translated into English, and perhaps I even mentioned it in another podcast. It's about why, let's say, people who get the garbage should earn more than bankers. And everybody who starts in our company gets this book. And always everybody said, why? And I also gave this book to people from the financial industry when I had meetings. And then last week, my colleague said, Tom, perhaps now people understand where this book is about. Because I always said, the financial industry, but it's also for other sectors, we are overpaid, and we should be more humble towards the people who do the real jobs, so to say. And it doesn't mean that they say helping people to get a mortgage and this kind of stuff, or giving proper advice and doing it in a more sustainable way, etc., isn't also something which can be very purposeful. But there still is a hierarchy of needs in society, and if you are not a doctor and not a teacher and not a policeman and not a fireman, you should at least accept that those people are more important than you are. So, and that's about being humble, and that's something which is totally lacking in our society. And I hope the crisis is a chance that this will change. But I'm very skeptical, because when the crisis is over, all this stuff is sometimes or often forgotten very fast. Although on the other hand, you can say, if you just see the development of the UN after the Second World War, I don't know, perhaps we're starting to think about the climate crisis more, or in a more profound way than we did until now. But I'm very curious. I hope that our teachers and our people who work in hospitals, that their salaries will be there will be a pay rise, but much more there will be a reflection going on how what kind of society do we want to have.
Well, yes, and I wonder if we will start seriously evaluating the shareholder capitalism model, because perhaps the heroes that will emerge from this this crisis won't be the usual suspects. They will be the CEOs who make the salary sacrifices. They will be those, we've got a company here in the UK, Timpsons, who offer dry cleaning and shoe repairs, and they've closed all of their stores, and they've guaranteed wages for the next 3 months, for example. Another case, and so maybe there will be a resetting of what we celebrate in business. And not to mention the fact that, as we saw in the financial crisis, it was off. Let's take Handelsbanken, for example, right? We've had one of the guys on our show. They came through the crisis pretty much unscathed. And again, I think we can make predictions here that the most progressive companies will be in the best position at the end of this. And so it will not just be the fact that we're perhaps choosing to celebrate some of these companies. It will be these companies are the ones that are successful and the ones that are still around and still making an impact. And for that very reason, we'll be looking to them more. The true adherents to shareholder capitalism, not those just signing declarations.
I mean, we also have, let's say, for the
not shareholder, should I say, not shareholder capitalism, but the true adherence to what might we call that sort of stakeholder capitalism or people first capitalism.
But if you have, let's say, this security and this trust and this mutual responsibility, you have there's a huge rest in the company. So everybody works pretty efficiently because there is no fear. If you talk about psychological safety, for instance, we also did in the past. If you talk about psychological safety, that's psychological safety. So I'm really interested what all those companies who talked in the past about psychological safety and our people are so important. I'm really interested how they act on what they said in the past. But if you have this in place, you have a huge commitment on this third part of the strategy. Are we going to win in comparison to other companies? And we definitely will, because there are so much projects in place, because we're not paralyzed by fear. So it's this idea of the snake who's sitting there and the rabbit is just waiting and doesn't do anything until the snake hits or bites. We're not waiting, we're running all the time. So the example I took as just to make it, let's say, more visualize it, I said we're going with a pretty fast car, moving into the garage, and after 3 months, the garage opens again, and there's a Formula 1 car which drives out, because we really worked hard on this. And this is something which, I mean, I will not go into details, because, I mean, it wouldn't be, let's say, from a competitive point of view, the smarter thing to do. I would like to, just to say, please, companies, if you put your people in the first place, try to use this also as a huge opportunity to come back with your Formula 1 car and try to gain as much as market share as possible. And we will also try, for instance, to declare we want to become market leader in the Netherlands. And people, and that will be just one of those projects in the coming months. We'll say, okay, we want to hire 10 times more people we are now, because we want to become market leader. So do you really want to work for a no-eshel company? This is the chance. We're not going to hire you immediately, because we also have to wait until the crisis is over. But you can already take your seat on the virtual bench.
Right.
And this virtual bench role already existed before. But now it's very easy to fill this virtual bench with a huge amount of people who say, okay, in this crisis, there's this asset test. Let's have a look around. What is the company I really would like to work for? Because the company I work for now has shown that it's not a company which cares about me in difficult times.
Yeah, I see that. And as you speak, I'm inspired. You're creating this fabulous metaphor of you coming out of this crisis as a Formula One car?
Yeah, I think it's. I just, for instance, during the weekend, I just went to my bookshelf and just took some books out. And I think because everybody knows Simon Sinek, I like this book even better. Why Leaders Eat Last. And he takes the army as an example. And I think people expect in difficult times that let's say people who are more mature or older, and it's not always about hierarchy, but people who have more life experience or are older, they should take the lead and be role models in companies. And in the army, it's very clear. And Simon Sinek, and I didn't read the book this weekend, but in the past, and he says, our people are willing who are in the lead to risk their lives for their people. Can you name me any CEO who is willing to do this? And that's something which works. The solidarity, in the most extreme form, works in the army. And that's something. I mean, I don't have a background of let's say serving in the army at all. So I'm a totally pacifist, so to say. But what I like is the solidarity and this role model, and leaders should take the lead, and they didn't. They should say, okay, can I give my salary to the company, or just try to imagine what happens to anybody I will lay off. In what situation is this person? Is there another salary? What will happen to this person? Is he able to pay the mortgage? Does the person have children, etc.? So it's also about emotional intelligence. And I also took another book, and this is also pretty known of a professor, and it's called The Last Lecture, which has been also on a TED Talk. But also Christopher Christensen did a great lecture on that. So it's about being human and just leading by example. But it doesn't have to be the CEO of a company. But it makes sense that the CEO of a company, who takes in a lot of companies those decisions, tries to be an example for his or her people.
I'm back for part 2 of my conversation with Tom van der Lubbe from Visy in the Netherlands. We were talking about your current situation. We were talking about how the nature of Visy and the fact that you've adopted holacracy, but which, for those who don't know, is a way of organizing your company that distributes authority throughout the organization. We call this a self-managed organization or self-organized company. This is something that has allowed you to respond very quickly to the current crisis, and in a way that is actually setting you up to be even stronger and more successful coming out of this. And one thing we got to right at the end of the conversation was sometimes we describe organizations like Visy as a quote leaderless organization. But it struck me as you were talking, as you were describing this metaphor of Visy going into the garage during this crisis and coming out as a supercar, the metaphors you were using, your attitude to this really did strike me as an act of leadership. So the question then becomes, well, are you being a leader within this quote leaderless organization?
Interesting question. I really think that when companies are built on strong values, that everybody acts as a leader in those companies. So just to take a totally different example, a lot of people know Patagonia. I think that a lot of people are really living the purpose of Patagonia. They will fight for climate change. They will be engaged in their communities. And on the one hand, you have the founder, who is a very, let's say, strong, value-oriented person. But on the other hand, you see the current CEO, who just came from outside, Rosa Marcario, who was one of the first who posted, I think a week and a half ago, that they would close down all the shops and also the company, but they would pay the salaries. That's leadership, and she was not the founder, for instance. So I think also companies are very strongly based on values also attract people with strong values. And then it's easy that those people who say, okay, this is really the company I want to work for, this whole purpose topic, that they also behave with a sense of leadership in times of crisis, because they have those values in their own DNA.
Okay. So I wonder if we'd be better calling this style of organization a leaderful organization, or leadership full organization.
You have it. I mean, you also have it in, if you take Simon Sinek, and you talk about his book Why and his TED Talk. One of the famous examples he uses is Martin Luther King, and he says, when I didn't took the book this morning or yesterday, but when I remember correctly, he says, and I think this is the case in a lot of situations, people didn't go on the street because of Martin Luther King. No, because they wanted to express their opinions on that. And you have this nowadays as well. So I just think that movements that can be climate change, but it was in the 70s where people who let's say, demonstrated for peace or against nuclear missiles, etc. People have a kind of purpose for themselves, and then you have a kind of framing, and it can be Patagonia if you like outdoor sports and also want to save, let's say, nature. Then you have a possibility of bringing yourself to work with your whole purpose and your whole energy, perhaps sometimes also your anger, and then people act on that. And that's what's happening at the moment. So on the one hand, you see positive examples, companies acting responsively with solidarity, like Patagonia, and then everybody says, great, we like Patagonia, and everybody is liking this messages on LinkedIn. And on the other hand, you have the shitstorm example, where companies are laying off people, and then you have a negative shitstorm, which says, no, you can't do this in times of crisis. Companies should behave with solidarity, etc. So I just think that if we have a kind of company and have a kind of value set and a kind of purpose, then people say, okay, that's the company I would like to work for, and then they behave automatically in the way we would like people to behave.
Right. So for you, it's all about the DNA. Well, it's the DNA of the company and how you set the company up. It's what that company then attracts in terms of the type of people who want to work there. Perhaps they're naturally more inclined to show leadership traits when under stress.
It's also a good quote in Holacracy, that the purpose is, let's say, the CEO of the company. And
purpose, I think that is the CEO of the company. Say that again. So, explain.
So
that.
you're not obeying a person. No, you're following the purpose. So I would say, what makes purpose-oriented companies strong? That there is a purpose which is not linked to the person. That can be the person who founds the company or who is in charge, etc. This is just somebody who, at that moment, perhaps helps for a certain period of time. But it also can be much more, or many more people. If you have a lot of, let's say, organizations where people do a lot of non-profit work, etc., there is not so clear who is in charge. And if you have a rotation principle, for instance, okay, now I am the one who is, let's say, doing this podcast videos and doing the media, etc. But also, let's say, in consultancy companies or in law firms, there is much clearer, and those companies also can have a certain purpose. Perhaps they are less known to us. But for instance, governments, if you would say, certain governments would say, our purpose is living the democracy, then the president is, just for a certain period of time, the one who is trying, let's say, to to communicate this purpose. And then if you communicate the purpose, you have this old link again to the state as an example. And if you say what's the purpose of a country, then it's the constitution. It's about, or the French Revolution, I often use as an example. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. So these are the three, you can perhaps not goals, but that's the purpose of the French state. And the president of the French state is the one who takes care for this, let's say, claim of the French state, of the French society for a certain period of time. And that's something I think CEOs, when companies are very strong and very long-term oriented or very purposeful, then you have probably exactly the same.
Right. So could we can infer from what you've said that in these times, it may be valuable for leaders to reflect on that, reflect more deeply on the purpose of the organization and seek to serve that?
But I think it's on all levels. So it's very interesting that you already have on a let's say society level, the discussion starts, will this crisis be a turning point in, let's say, the whole discussion about capitalism? So if you take, let's say, the campaign of the Financial Times, Reset Capitalism, it's not so long ago, a few months ago. Okay, it's not exactly the same date as the coronavirus at the moment, but let's say from a historical perspective, if you would say, okay, let's try to go 50 years in the future. What will this crisis, what effect will this crisis have? On an economic point of view, will this about this discussion reset capitalism? Will this be the turning point in getting away from shareholder value capitalism to multi-stakeholder capitalism? And you also have this on the level of the companies. Is this a turning point where in companies we really start to discuss what is the essence, raison d'être, I don't know the English word, what's the reason for being of a company? Is this to make as much as profit as possible? And then you have the level of the let's say the individual human being, where you at the moment discussions have, is it useful that the most brilliant people are optimizing e-commerce companies and algorithms behind that, and in our health system we're not able to really act on this corona crisis. So the IT structure of let's say comparison sites of EasyJet tickets, they have the brilliant people, and if you talk about the reaction and also the speed, how fast our governments are able to react on the pandemic crisis, then you find out that they have to count the amount of people with these illnesses, and they are still sending let's say those cases by fax. That was a huge scandal in Switzerland as an example.
Right.
But if I search on the internet for a flight and I have Skyscraper or all those companies, how they are called, there are those brilliant people who are just able to optimize open software stuff to react much faster on that. So I think you will have this discussion on a lot of levels. Is this a turning point, yes or no?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it could be, couldn't it? It could certainly accelerate that conversation. I think the people's relationship to the brands that are not people first, are not stakeholder driven, will change. I think that people will remember the behaviors of some of the firms right now that are putting shareholders first. And that will have an impact.
You already had also in the, I even don't know if I used this example in your podcast in the past, but you have this development of boycott. So you have a boycott, which was invented in Ireland. You can just find it on Wikipedia. Very interesting. And then boycott, people found out that their power, their collective power, is much bigger than they thought it would be. And in our, let's say, consumer society, I don't know if you know this artist, I shop and therefore I am. I just forgot the name. You have so it's I mean it's not I think and therefore I am Descartes. No, it's I shop and therefore I am in our society, which is totally, let's say, exploding of overconsumption. You already had this kind of niche to have this huge amount of stuff, or is less more. And I think in this kind of crisis, where let's say companies don't behave in a very, I mean, people expect solidarity, and if you do exactly the opposite, I think at the moment that people just say, okay, I'm not going to buy from this company because I just read that they don't care at all about their people. So it could be a kind of turning point that people say, okay, I saw this in this crisis. I just make a list of all those companies who really behaved badly.
Yeah, bring on the boycott. Yeah, I think there's something good for what you're saying here. I think that's true.
And you have nowadays the let's say the possibility of spreading this kind of stuff in a very fast way. That's the viral effect. So
yeah,
the viral effect, which we didn't understand for a long time because we have difficulties with let's say understanding exponential functions. It goes so fast, we really don't understand this. The human brain has a huge problem understanding the exponential function, and that's why we're always amazed all the time that the amount of dead people doubles or goes up with 30%, etc. But this viral effect, you could also use this viral effect in a positive way. So if you take the boycott, and there is a company who lays off a lot of people, and it has an owner who is a billionaire, and it wouldn't be any problem to just continue to pay those people, and somebody would post this and says, look here, just have a look, this is the net value or the net worth of this owner, and this is the amount of money he saves, or she saves, but mostly he saves with laying off those people. So we just decide we're not going to buy from this company anymore.
Yeah, I think we get. I mean, there's an example right now in the UK. So one of the pub chains here, they've said that they're going to pay their staff late. They're closing the pubs and they're going to pay their staff late, which of course is putting a huge amount of stress and anxiety on these individuals. And somebody has daubed, they've graffitied one of these pubs saying "Pay your staff," and that photo has spread far and wide, right, across the internet.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right that the public shaming of these companies who are playing capitalism in a different way has such power now and can reach such a huge audience so quickly. Yeah, that I think it will have a lasting impact on some of these brands.
And you have the opposite example. For instance, yesterday evening I posted, and because I saw it on the internet, and it's Banco Santander, which is also pretty known in the UK. And the owner, or one of the, let's say, biggest owners of the Banco Santander is the family Bottin. Or I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. And the woman who is the CEO of this Anna Bottin, she did a post I don't know, 1 day ago, and she said, "I just taking it because I have my iPhone here," and she just publishes on the internet, and that's what nowadays works very well, because everybody can see it immediately and people like it. In Spain, we employ 29,000 people, and we will not lay off employees temporarily or otherwise during the pandemic. The months ahead will continue to bring change. Let's remain vigilant and stay healthy, I'm confident we will emerge stronger by continuing to work together.
Yeah.
So and then what happens? I don't know how many people like this this post, and there you have a separation. On the one hand, you have people who behave in a way people expect this. People should do this, and this is a family who has billions. And on the other hand, you have people who have billions and own companies, and then they lay off people, and people say, how is it possible that people who are so wealthy behave in such an egoistic way?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, capitalism has rewarded them to do so. The whole society, the game of capitalism has rewarded them to seek wealth. We celebrate them on the pages of the most prominent magazines. We celebrate the billionaires. So they played the game that they've been asked to play, and they've succeeded at it. So in some sense, all of us could have been tempted in similar ways, given the opportunities that those individuals have had. So I see this as potentially an opportunity to change the rules of the game, to change the carrots and the sticks, to change how we relate to this thing we call capitalism. Yeah.
But I had I knew that it was like that, but the interesting thing is that there is a lot of research done on how successful companies are, and what is very hopeful, and that's why I really would like to invite all those people who are in charge of those companies and have the power to decide on these topics, to really have a look on this. Companies who act in a responsible way and took, let's say, a responsible way of dealing with crisis, they really came out better after the crisis. And we are also, and if people are, let's say, see themselves as shareholder driven, they are more successful. So even if you would say, I don't care at all about my people, I just want to I want to maximize profits, I still can say, if you act in a human way, and if you show solidarity, it's from an economic point of view a wise decision.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not my starting point. As let's say our company, and that was before the crisis, we have 4.9 on a 5.0 scale of Trustpilot for our clients, although our clients are second. So companies who act very on, let's say, impactful, they have better returns. So that's the interesting thing again, that those people think that they are totally wise, and they take from their point of view a very wise economic decision, but it's even from their point of view not a wise decision. And that's what I like about it, because if it would be that the people who act in a human way are the ones who have, let's say, problematic returns afterwards, then you would say, I like your approach, but you're ruining your company, or you just don't earn enough. But that's not the case. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
So I would really ask all those people who are really shareholder value oriented and really want to please their stock owners, to dive into this topic before you lay off your people, and really have a look about this and say to your shareholders, if you really want to have high returns, we should not lay off our people.
Yeah. And you need look no further than Handelsbanken, which is another self-organized, highly self-organized organization, who came out pretty much unscathed from the financial crisis, right? So
that's always the example I also take in the Netherlands. We have three banks in the Netherlands: ING, ABN AMRO, and Rabobank. Rabobank is the old cooperative bank. It's the bank of the farmers. And they are a world market player and still doing agricultural loans, etc. The Rabobank was the only bank which came through the crisis without support of the state. ING and ABN AMRO had to be saved by the government. It's exactly the same as Handelsbanken and other banks in Scandinavia. So it's really really interesting that this very, I don't know, it's a kind of people are in a kind of framing, and they don't question if their framing or their conclusions are correct or right. It's the same with the bonus system. Bonus is counterproductive. So if you really want to have a productive workforce, you should abolish your bonuses.
Mm.
Same topic. So
well, let's see. I mean, this may be a situation where we really see we get, so with the financial crisis gave us some evidence that this style of organization was superior when it comes to surviving crises, but it really it mainly applied to the financial sector. This is going to be across practically all sectors, so perhaps we're going to accumulate even a bigger evidence set this time around. Should we take?
I just want to add one thing. I mean, because you always have discussion on this topic, I always would admit that there are examples on very difficult industries where in the end you will find out that you don't have any other alternative. So, but we're always discussing the, say, what's your first reaction? Is your first reaction to take the Excel sheet and just say cost cutting, or is the first reaction, the dumbest reaction is to take the Excel sheet? The second best option is if you want to have all the people to work less, 20% less, because then you have the same effect. And the third and the most intelligent step would be to ask the people to discuss the topic or the goal of saving 20% in their teams, and then you will find out that some people will work 60% afterwards because they can afford, and otherwise they can't afford to work 20% less because they are divorced and they have to raise 2 children or something like that, and they will still work 100%. So, and that's the point I want to make. I don't want to make the point that, for instance, I don't know, airliners, difficult subject, difficult industries, and these are the examples which are taken, then to put an opposite opinion against what we're discussing here. That's not where the discussion is about.
Yeah. Let's take a look at your meme. So I'm going to share screen now for those watching. This is, talk us through this that you've created.
Yeah, it's let's say we are a #1 great place to work company in the Netherlands. If you talk about the category of 50 people, we are around 40 people now. And today, just coincidence, but today it was published that we are on this list again. They didn't tell who will be the winner because this event is cancelled and it will take place. I don't know exactly when, and then they will say who's #1. We don't know if we are #1 again or #2 or #3. And we said we even don't care because that's not important at the moment. Who's #1 or who's #2 or who's #3. So we really want to focus and pay attention on and ask people to pay attention on how companies treat their employees during this crisis. And because it really, it says it speaks volumes for their core ethics.
So let's read it out. Pay attention to how companies treat their employees during this time. It speaks volumes to their core ethics.
Yeah, and what we really want to stress is that in normal times, when you don't have a crisis, the topic also plays a huge role, how people are treated. But now you see it, this kind of acid test we talked before in the first part of the interview. You see those examples, and we really want to stress, if you see this, act on this. So you can, as a consumer, you can have an influence. You can decide, do I buy my stuff at a company where they just laid off the people, and where they don't treat their people well, or do I buy my stuff at a company where they have a human approach, where they know what solidarity means, and you already see what that this behavior takes place. So people are asking around in the neighborhood. They think about buying in the grocery just around the corner, and they ask, "How are you going? How are you doing?" There's a lot of interaction also going in with the neighbors. People putting notes. Shall I help you? Shall I go you to the grocery and this kind of stuff? And that's what people like. People like to care for each other. And that's what we want to stress. So it's not about, are we number one great place to work? We don't care. Let's try to do a kind of pledge. I don't know if it's called pledge, or do a kind of appel, or that people take care about each other, but also try to influence this. And you have this example of, which is called boycott. We live in
which is
our consumer
which you just said. So
society.
this is the boycott opportunity.
Yeah. Use your power as a consumer to make a stand. That's where it's about. It's about standing and not about branding. Take a stand as a consumer.
That's right. So it's almost like, okay. So it's like be we talk about purpose organizations, value-driven organizations. Be a purpose-driven, value-driven consumer.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a very important and good example in the Netherlands. It's called Tony Chocolonely. It's a chocolate brand, and they said we want to have 100% slave-free chocolate. And it just took them a couple of years before they were
100% slavery-free chocolate, presumably. Not slavery chocolate.
Because they said this chocolate stuff is done by small children, but they become market leader. And just a very simple and small example where people, when they go to buy this chocolate, say, okay, it's something where I can make a difference, so let's buy that chocolate. But you also have it with the Max Havelaar label, that you can decide, do I buy this kind of bananas where I know it's fair trade? So in this whole fair trade organization or fair trade development, which started probably in the 70s, something like that, that really had a huge influence. So let's try not to underestimate our influence we have as consumers.
Yeah.
I also think, for instance, people who apply for jobs afterwards. So I would also say all those people who are working in companies when the crisis is over, make another list of companies who really behave well, make a list of them, study them when you are at home now, and when the crisis is over, really think about, am I working in the right company, or should I better move from, let's say, to Banco Santander? That's the example I mentioned, because they behaved well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it echoes actually one of the last guest, Tom Zaki, who runs TerraCycle in the US, this big commercial recycling firm.
I know him.
He says exactly the same thing. This power of the vote is in the dollar, right? So, or in your pound or your euro. Much more powerful what we do with our money than what we do with our vote at the ballot box right now. So yeah, you're echoing, and then that would be another prediction I would make. That's another company I can fully expect to come out stronger from this crisis. Okay, well, perhaps that brings us to conclude of part 2 of this conversation. I mean, that seems to be the pertinent message that we want to leave people with here.
Yeah, let's try. I mean, we have a double purpose: change finance and change work. But in times of crisis, let's try to change society. It's also an opportunity.
Yeah, huge opportunity. Okay, well, thank you once again. Look forward to stitching this, the part 1 and part 2 of this together, and we'll get it out as a full episode to people. And yeah, for people who need, and for those who do need mortgage advice, in what are the markets you operate in?
No, we're only in the Netherlands, so it doesn't play any role. So all the stuff we do, also internationally, it doesn't have any effect on our business, which is perhaps very good, because then everybody knows we're not doing this because it's let's say purpose washing. because I mean we are not active in the UK. So
Yeah, but
and
for anybody who happens to be listening in the Netherlands,
yeah, but even then, you know, let's say most people just come by as referrals. Also the people who work for us. So and that's and that works perfectly well. So, but it's right. Probably 25%, for instance, of the people who work for us, they find out by articles or podcasts, etc., and say, okay, that's a company I really like because it's purpose driven.
yeah.
So it could be that Dutch people listen to this UK podcast or English podcast and say, oh, I need a mortgage, but
Pretty unlikely, you're saying.
Pretty unlikely.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, nonetheless, thank you for your contribution. Fantastic conversation. And yeah, thank you for your time. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, let's try to change society, Richard. thanks for your let's say time, and not only time but also your energy, because it must be an immense amount of energy you need to create such great podcasts every week, because you have a speaker every week, and I always see in my inbox another episode and say, how is this guy doing this? Incredible. So I applaud for you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, let's as you say, let's use your euros and dollars and pounds and whatever else wisely over this next period. Adios. Thank you.